Hey everyone, welcome to the stream. I'm Genesee from Good Shepherd Entertainment, and today I have the pleasure of introducing Brendan Redfield and Redbeard the Loremaster, as you might know him as, and also Mohammed Abdul Rahim, the Monster Train software engineer that you probably know as Marimo on Discord. So let me know if there's anything awkward with the sound, you guys can't hear anything, but we're going to be having questions, so I'll grab them from chat in Steam and Twitch. So go ahead and start asking if you have them, and I will scroll as it becomes appropriate. So let's start with Marimo. Hopefully you guys have been in Discord. If you have not, we'll throw the link up there for you. A great place to connect with other people in the community and talk about all the great Monster Train stuff you're doing. And one of the things that has been going on lately is a really cool project that he has going on with color. So can you break that down for us and tell people what you're up to?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been working on recently, which will come to an eventual update in the game, is colorblind accessibility modes for Monster Train. And this was largely based off of player feedback that all of you guys in the community have provided us in our feedback discussion channels. So what it essentially is we have a few key colors we use to represent different facets of the game, such as if something's going to be damaged, or if it's going to be healed, if it's a persistent status effect. There's about 4 or so key colors that, depending on who you are and what you're able to perceive, can be difficult. I know that one of my good friends is red-green colorblind as an example, and he has been messaging me that he has had some trouble playing the game in the past because he could not tell the difference between a status effect that was a buff or a status effect that was a debuff. So one of the things we are going to be rolling out at some point in the future is the ability to fully customize those colors to, whatever works for you. We're going to have a few default options that should be a general catch-all. If those don't work for you, you would be able to go in, tweak those colors to be whatever you'd like. If you want to, for some reason, make all those colors black, you can do that as well, make the game very difficult for yourself. But yeah,
A
that is
whole new
something
speed
that we are
challenge.
working on. Yeah, if you
Awesome.
just don't want to have any information instead, you could definitely do that if you are so inclined.
Okay, so what can people do? Like, what kind of information are you looking for right now that people could help you with?
Yeah, so if you are someone who has thoughts or opinions on this matter, you can go into Discord. You can at me. That's totally fine. I don't mind being pinged. You could sort of provide information is what we're looking for mostly on what would be best for you. What would you like us as developers to know, and how can we help you to make the game more accessible for you?
So, okay, so I know there's been a couple things that have been community requests and that have been changed, sometimes for streamers, like an example of the static background for it helps me for motion sickness sometimes. But can you name some of the other things? I think there's like a double click and some other stuff that people have requested and kind of been brought to light by their feedback.
Yeah, so there's a lot of feedback that I've gone through, so it might give me a minute to remember something very specific. There's a lot of small gameplay feedback, there's some communication feedback. I think one of the coolest ones that came up recently was while we had the Friends and Foes public test train going on, we received some feedback that with the Shardtail Queen, she has a champion upgrade path where she will sacrifice imps and then deal extra damage based on the number of imps she sacrificed.
Oh, don't worry, that's part of
Previously,
my lore questions. Don't worry.
yeah, but previously we would visualize those imps dying with just a red X. And so there was player feedback saying we think that should be visualized differently, that the red X to us is indicating that it's dying in combat, not that it's being sacrificed. So there was a long discussion I had, I believe it was a Monday, with the community where I would present ideas with them actively. I was getting mock-ups to them. Eventually, we settled on showing a red exclamation mark to indicate that, yes, it's going to die. That's why it's red by default. But exclamation mark to indicate that it's not going to die by the default means. And that's very similar to the collectors that show up on the train where they have a violet exclamation mark. They're going to leave the battle, but not through death. And so that was actually something that came up through player feedback.
So now This sounds a lot like something that would, in my uneducated software mind, tie into the preview system, which I understand you helped design for battle. So how did that idea originate? And tell us how you're doing all the maths.
So basically what's actually going on is that I get an email whenever the game is played and I very, very quickly respond to it with the correct answer, and then the game
Amazing.
just knows.
Amazing.
No, what's actually going on is we're running the combat, because that's the most accurate way to know what's going to happen is, well, just do the combat. Don't show the visuals of it, just do the combat though. There's so many interactions that you can't really guess. Like, a unit might die and that unit might trigger something like harvest, and that's going to trigger something on another unit, and that's going to cause something to happen with the artifacts that you have collected, and you have this particular mutator on, so that just complicates it. The easiest solution is just do the combat, figure out what's going to happen, then compare the state at the end of the day to see that, okay, this is what it was, this is what it will be. If it lost 3 HP, it lost 3 HP, and we can show that.
Except when it comes to Legion of Wax.
Oh, yes, my favorite unit in the world.
Yeah. So tell us about your fun times.
Fun is a word that can be used to describe that, depending on who you are as a person. But yeah, so the difficulty there is that Legion of Wax, for those who are uninformed on what it does, is a unit that when it dies, it splits into 2 units. And when one of those units die, that splits again into 2 different units. That is a very difficult interaction in general. It was prone to bugs even without a preview system in place, where it would split, but the splits would end up in sort of weird locations. They're not in the exact correct spawn point. This was in early development. It gets even more complicated when we consider there are effects that could duplicate what happens there. So it might split into 4 units, and then each of those might split. Then you have to consider the fact that there's relentless combat with bosses, where that keeps going until either it dies or the boss dies, which has performance implications as well, if you really want to think about that. There are cards like Intent on Death, where you could play it on Legion of Wax, and it will die and do its effect without actually dying. So the fact that this unit existed was sort of a nightmare for me to work through, but in the end, I think it was a good thing, because in going through all of those bugs, it just strengthened the preview system in general during development. The fact that we had such a complicated mechanic with this unit led me to constantly find new things to fix with the preview system to make sure it was working, and that just has global benefits throughout the game and not just with that unit. That said, during the playtest sessions and the beta and all the pre-development fun times that were going on, if the community decided they did not like that unit at all, we would have just cut it. That was going to be an option.
Okay.
However, everybody loved the unit. They loved the concept of the unit, and they said it has to work. People were picking the unit knowing that it might cause a bug, knowing that it might, in early development, crash the game at times. They picked it anyway because they just thought it was a fun unit, so that's a sign that you have to fix it and you can't get rid of it.
Awesome.
So that ended up being my card in the credits. I am represented by Legion of Wax. I do want to say, I was watching a YouTube video of the credits of the game, and somebody was commenting, they were asking why did, the different cards get chosen for the different developers on the team. And somebody said a lie, and they said, well, the Legion of Wax was chosen because the developer really liked it. I want to clarify, I didn't have a choice in the matter. Our art director basically said, that is the card that is going to be used to represent you. And so it was. I didn't really get a choice in the matter on it. So to whoever made that comment on YouTube, you're slightly incorrect there. I just wanted to clarify.
Very particular, I understand. Okay, so questions from the chat. AmphiDSF says, how often do you get reports of a bug to preview that isn't bugged?
I've made bug reports about the preview system where it wasn't actually a bug, and then immediately made another bug report after that saying that I was wrong. So we have a saying in the office that the preview system is always right, except for when it's not. But in general, it's pretty good. So yeah, all the time. We get that all the time.
Okay, and now for something completely different. Let's talk to Brendan about lore, which I have to tell you, man, I'm getting comments. Redbeard does not have a beard. It's disturbing to them. What's the deal?
Quarantine. That's really all I can say. Just losing my mind slowly. So decided to go for a change, shave off the beard, and try something new. So it'll make a comeback.
Gotcha. Okay, another very important question from Junkmaster 10. Where did Big Sledge get his hat? Dude, I don't. I just had to ask it.
So that I actually think that came from the character design iteration. When originally what the direction was for Big Sledge was we just wanted him to be like this big slime monster for the Melting Remnant. And it came back as like, this is pretty cool, but we really want to tie it to like some of these factions that we have. So like, let's give him a bowler hat. And it worked, and now it's forever canonized as Big Sledge's hat.
There you go. Okay, so for those who've never played Monster Train, first of all, what are you waiting for? And secondly, can you just give like a basic, this is the original story that you would have known if you played, and now we have Exiled from Friends and Foes, and how those two fit together, because it feels a little timey-wimey to me.
It feels a little.
It feels a little timey-wimey to me. Like there's some present past alignment of confluence
Definitely.
happening. So can you break that down?
Yeah. So basic overview of Monster Train. You are fighting as Hell, trying to reclaim Hell, which has been frozen over, and Hell has been taken over by Heaven, the Winged, Angels. So you are aboard a train, the Monster Train, the Bone Shaker, taking back Hell as you ride through to restore the Pyre, which is your life force in the top of the train, to the Pit of Hell, which is going to basically restore the flames and unfreeze everything, and all's well and good after that. So the Exiles, when the most recent DLC, are a new faction, kind of. They're all existing characters within the world, but they've existed a long time prior to when the game takes place, if we want to call that the present, when the game came out. So the Exiles are characters that had something to do with the version of the world that existed prior to the Rail, prior to the Covenant, which are all key pieces to the lore for people that want to dive into that, which I hope so if you're in the stream. And they, without giving too much away, have to do with, they sacrifice themselves effectively. They sacrifice their souls to protect the world, so to speak, and in doing so really failed. They failed at what they wanted to do, which was something to do with Titans, something to do with divinities. I'm going to be intentionally vague there. So yeah, it's kind of a non-answer to your question.
Fair enough. So going through the different clans that you have in the game, starting with Hellhorned, we learned that imps can transfer their learning post-death, and that they also gain horns and growth. So how does this work, and why does that mean we should be okay with yeeting them at our enemies?
So Hellhorn, as do most clans in Monster Train, cycle. And what that means is that they don't really die. So for imps, for example, when they die or cease to exist for a short period of time, they really just mutate into bigger imps until they become demons, until they eventually become imps again. So there's a cycle for Hellhorn in particular. So as they grow, their horns grow, as you can see with some of the units that are in the Hellhorn clan. But they don't actually die. So you can eat them all you want. They're going to be fine.
Good to know. Good to know. Horns seem really important for collection and kind of swag with them. Why is that? What's this fascination?
So Hellhorn was originally designed as just kind of this is the intro to Hell. It's demons. It's like very kind of reminiscent of Doom and Hell and all these kinds of things that you normally associate with Hell. So trying to center everything around this kind of super aggro culture where horns are very, very important, because fighting and combat and strength and combat prowess are very, very important in that clan. So horns are kind of a natural way of going down that path where if horns are very important to the identity of a particular demon or to a hellhorn, then let's snap them off. If you beat a specific demon in battle, then you're going to want to snap off their horns, just kind of as a big old, F you, I beat you. Yeah. So that's definitely been the fascination. It's combat prowess and strength.
Esoteric question from Holvater Zero. When does an imp stop being an imp and become a demon?
It really all comes down to the eye of the beholder, I think. So if it's, I guess specifically horn size. Let's say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So jumping to the other side, the heaven aspect. We have a covenant with heaven. We've heard vague things about. There's ambassadors apparently assigned to this. And it feels like the clans have this really unique culture that we only get hints of, like scorched plains and reclusive monsters and things. So how can people find out more about the lore in game?
Yeah, so nearly everything in the game has lore associated with it. If you go to settings in the game and enable lore tooltips, you can hover over cards, over artifacts, over even like the little banners that you see on the map itself, so like the Scorched Plains. And there will be a little snippet of lore that we've written to just provide a little bit more context about their place in the world and their story and just how they fit into everything.
Obviously, it's you in real life, but in-game, who is writing these snippets of lore?
That is a character named Herzel.
Oh.
He is kind of a figure that is in the game. I know that some people have spotted him just as a vague silhouette. He may or may not show up more later. Again, a non-answer. But everything is written from his perspective. So I know that there's been some conversation in various Discord channels that you as the player are playing as Herzel, or you are the lore is being written from your perspective. But everything is being written from Herzel's perspective. So on the front of the logbook, for example, it says Herzel's logbook. The idea being that this is all kind of, it's a found story. So you've found all of this information in these recordings that Herzel has made over time. And everything is written from his kind of overly like purple with his own little bits of commentary thrown in there.
And if I were to say that his perspective was a heavenly one, what exactly is his perspective, Brendan?
Let's say that his perspective is unique.
Okay, okay. Gaia. Here's a question from Jen McBacon. Who is Arcus, one of the new exiled bosses? From all the game dialogue I saw from him, he seems to be like Seraph's brother. The assumption could be wrong, though.
The assumption is correct. So Arcus and Fel and Seraph are all related. They are all siblings. Arcus is an exile. So Seraph, Fel, and Arcus have all existed for thousands of years, as have several other people or characters in the game. It's unusual that they've existed for thousands of years. I don't know why. But Arcus has, like all the exiles, has disappeared for thousands of years because of the Exodus, because of the sacrifice that they made. And it's important to note that all the exiles were on the same side. So Arcus, Talos, Sharktail Queen, all of the new champions from that update were all allies. So it's unusual that something has happened over those thousands of years that has forced them to choose sides. In the timeline of things, the exile and the Exodus happened. The Rail didn't exist. Heaven and Hell existed very, very differently than what they exist in game, or even during the Rail and the Covenant. So Arcus, as he's come back, same with Talos, have gone through some traumatic experiences, I guess, is what I'll say.
Got you. Okay, Guy Gastu has an important question. Do new imps ever exist, or are they the same since the start of cycling? And Aesets also asks, like, if this is so, like, is Shardtail Queen the mother of the prince, and how do families work in the Hellhorn? They just use
Oh man. So new imps do exist. It's a very, very rare thing to happen. So really, like the baby imps that are in the Friends and Foes update are actually very, very old. They have been trapped away with the Shardtail Queen. So a lot of life, like in all of the clans, is cycled. So once life exists, it's kind of flat. Everything exists and cycles and dies and is reborn and et cetera, et cetera. So families are really not necessarily biological, but kind of a found family sort of thing. So at a certain point in time, the Hornbreaker Prince was much older than the Shardtail Queen. And it's more of just kind of a naming scheme that is associated with their ranking within the society rather than any sort of father and son, mother-son dynamic.
Gotcha. Okay, they're asking, did you read the crazy theories in Discord about the Exile Champions that people are extrapolating basically just from the name, and what did you think of them?
I don't know that I actually read those, so I'd be curious to hear more about those. Unfortunately, I didn't see those.
I read all of them by contrast.
And what did you think about them?
Some of the things you say are right, some of the things you say are wrong. Keep it coming.
It's very non-committal, Marimo.
But I read nearly everything in the Discord, so...
Yes. All right, so let's see. The Awoken, going on to them and their symbiotic connection to the Wildwood, or focus on growth. This is kind of an interesting deck as well. Like, how would you break that down for someone choosing them?
Mohammed, you want to take that one?
Like break down the gameplay side of things for why you should choose Awoken?
Like, how does the lore... I mean, it obviously is reflective in the mechanics that are inherent in the cards. So how do they tie together for you?
Well, from the mechanical perspective, they're obviously much more obviously defensive class. Like, you're healing a lot more. It's a lot more life focused. So it seemed kind of like a natural opposition to have a little bit more of a green, I guess is like the very, very basic way of putting it. Life-focused clan from a lore perspective. But they, as kind of non-hell-like as they seem up front, I think that they're actually probably one of the darker ones, just because of how they function. The idea being that souls are trapped in hell. Everything exists in hell around the capturing and cultivation of souls. And in the Awoken, in the Wildwood Forest in particular, that is reflected in souls being literally trapped. So the vines of the Wildwood will trap a soul and slowly kind of exert its will on that soul until it's been effectively brainwashed, at which point it becomes a hollow. And then once it's been completely brainwashed, becomes an animus. And at a certain point, once their will and their soul has kind of evaporated completely into the Wildwood, they become a channeler. So the cycle there, like compared to the Hellhorn, is a lot longer and more drawn out, but still exists all around this kind of ecosystem with the Wildwood. But is really kind of dark when you think about it, that they're trapping people and then just like brainwashing them to do whatever they want to. And that's hell.
Yeah,
that's hell, man.
Parasitically terrifying.
Yeah.
Okay. This is kind of back to Herzl. Kojuhan asks, why does Seraph think that Herzl's a traitor? And then there's a follow-up with names I'm going to butcher horribly that might relate. Who is Malika and, oh my gosh, WYNGH? Say them. I don't know. I don't know who those are. Only mentioned by Arcus. Arcus mentions them, apparently.
Yes.
M-A-L-I-C-K-A.
It is a very interesting. I can tell you, it's probably the most interesting thing. Why he's a traitor. But you won't. But I'm not going to say here, unfortunately. I will say that all of those, Wing, Malika, and Herzl and Arcus are all related in some way. So it's interesting that you may mention them in the same breath. But what that connection is, I will leave up to them to find out.
Got you. So how does this like winged class structure happen where everyone wants wings, and if you don't have wings, you want to pretend you have wings visually? How does all of that work?
So heaven is a lot more singular, or at least was, than hell was. Hell's broken up into 9 rings. Heaven is really its own place. And the main division there being the clipped and the winged. The humans kind of are on the lower rung, but they exist not in heaven. They exist in a third kind of realm that we haven't talked about too much. The main split being between Seraph and Fel, and them being siblings. It is interesting that something may have happened that has caused a rift between them, and for winged to either intentionally or unintentionally have their wings clipped. So over time, wings have just been seen as kind of this a status symbol, basically, as Seraph has consolidated power and tried to make the population of heaven more uniform in exerting his will over hell. Wings have been seen as kind of the thing to strive to be. I mean, you can see this just in the enemy designs of the units that you're fighting against as you progress in the game, that the ones with the wings are the most badass ones. So of course you want wings. But some of the ones that want wings but don't have them, like Fel, are equally as destructive and dangerous, just from a different perspective.
Gotcha. I mean, you're talking heaven and hell, and that usually involves a deity of some sort. But in this case, the deity that I'm thinking of, I'd love to know if this is so, is the Stygian and their sleeping titan, this unnamed titan. They have priests for it, they have guards for it. Is it a god? What is it? And why is it important to keep it asleep, and that's keeping it safe?
Yeah. So there are deities in Monster Train, and it is obviously a little bit different than what the normal like Christian understanding of heaven and hell are. We don't have like God and Jesus, and at least yet, maybe not. Maybe that will happen. But there are titans. So in Stygian clan, we have the unnamed titan that's been trapped and is sleeping underwater. We have another titan that's seen on the map. The bogworm remains. The bogworm was a titan as well. 2 other titans that are important that have been mentioned very, very briefly are Wing, which someone just mentioned, and Fear. Fire is kind of what that translates to. And all of those corresponding to different elements. So that ties into something larger that I won't talk about here. But titans are kind of the deities of heaven, hell, and humans. And they control all life and matter, and what has happened, what will happen, why things keep happening over and over again. Yeah.
So they're talking about the bogworm now, and the question's coming up. Lower gamepeg question: what is a wormkin, and what do they look like? And I guess, does this relate to bogworm?
So wormkin, as I'm sure you can imagine from the name, are similar to bogworm. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Alrighty.
Be annoying to beg about that.
No, it's fair. So Eosets asks, did the pyre, the one we have to relate, exist back in the days of the Exiles in the same form? I ask this because of a possible connection to fire mentioned by Sharptail.
The pyre did not exist when the Exiles had their exodus. No more explanation.
Oh, I'm not going to read it. They're making jokes about earth, wind, fire, and water. Did they summon Captain
I may or may not have been rewatching Avatar when all of this was being written.
Yes. Okay, so the Umber Shroud. What is it? It seems to think it's an entity.
It does. It is a singular entity that has split off into individual entities that can think individually and as a whole. It's a very weird non-humanoid thing. It can split into little morsels, which are cool. It can split into gorgers, and penumbra is part of that as well. So it really is just kind of all across the board. It can pretty much be whatever it wants. It's just a big old shadow.
RJL asks, why does Primordium invoke the names of the other exiled champs in his voice lines? Is there a reason there?
So Primordium is probably the oldest of anything in one of the oldest of anything in the game right now. And in terms of like cognitive functioning, Primordium, it cannot really convey words very easily. It can't communicate, but it can understand concepts. It can understand the beings that it was trapped with for thousands of years. So it's really kind of a slow process of losing its mind as well. And that then bleeding into the Umbra Shroud at large. So it's really just because it's been with those people for thousands of years. Wouldn't you be saying the same names of those people as well if you had been stuck with Mohammed and I for thousands of years?
Calling out its crew.
God help you if that were to ever happen.
He's just going to be muttering.
Marimo.
Marimo.
Yeah, you don't want to go down that path.
Yeah.
Okay, Chaos for A11 and everyone else in the world just wants to know the answer to this question. Is Primordium just 3 morsels in a trench coat?
It's very possible that it's 3 morsels in a trench coat, and that the trench coat is made out of more morsels, and it's just a morsel fiesta. There might even be more than 3 under there. Who knows?
Oh. Okay. Guys, if you're asking questions and I haven't asked it yet, just paste it again in here if you would. I will get to you all as many as I can. Do so. Okay, so I think we'll jump into... Oh no, I want to ask us about the Void. The Void seems like a drug of choice. Like, how does Voidness work with this particular clan? Oh, everyone's...
A Void is... so, in terms of its actual effects, it's... it basically breaks you off of the Shroud. So it makes you an individual for a certain amount of time, but it also just kind of makes you forget everything. So if a morsel were to take a Void, it would just kind of like sprawl on the ground and feel nothing for a few hours because it's totally disconnected from the Shroud. And then it would probably get eaten by a Gorger.
Oh.
But, yeah.
Don't do drugs, friends.
Don't do drugs.
Don't do Void. All right. Also, places that you sounds like you don't want to be. The Crucible. Is this just a work project for people, or how does this mine happen? It's pretty integral, it seems, to the lore there.
Yeah. They just hang out there. They do some work. Around the water, just kicking around, doing some Void. No, they live there as well. So the mines of the Crucible are just tunnels that have slowly been carved out over millennium. And the Shroud actually resides within the stone. So they kind of seep into the stone. They don't actually live in like open spaces like you or I would. But when they're done, when they've clocked in their time and they're clocking out, they just kind of seep back into the stone and chill, watch some Netflix, hang out.
Interesting. How does the Ember Forge eat morsels, and why don't Umbers eat the morsels around the Ember Forge?
It can't see the morsels under the Ember Forge. It's too big.
It's too big.
But it also helps move it around, so, it's kind of a you help us, we'll help you.
Maybe they're terrified of the fact that there's a forge that can move by itself and fling across the floor to hit its enemies. Maybe that's it.
And as for how the Ember Forge can eat other morsels, well, there are other morsels under there, so I'll let you connect the dots of who's eating who.
Let's see. How do new souls enter Stygian and Umbra? More soul questions. Meaning of life.
Yeah, the meaning of life. Don't we all want to know? So for Stygian, So the way that heaven and hell used to work, where that souls were kind of ferried from humans, there is a human realm. They were ferried from heaven to hell. They were judged at a certain point, and those souls would move to whatever ring of hell they were best suited to. Heaven, if they were generally not assholes. And for the Stygian cycle is actually that it's not a cycle. It's very static. So once a soul is there, it's like Siren, it's a guardian, your Tethys, you are that forever, basically. For the Shroud, you're kind of just a drop in the bucket. So you're just added to the collective. And if you are a soul that has been added to the Crucible, then you are just immediately thrown into this huge shadow and kind of left to figure it out for yourself. And eventually you just kind of go mad. And that is just the meaning of life, I suppose.
It's a dark world you live in, Brendan. Okay, so here's one, if I can find it. To come back asks, the Exiles were trapped together for thousands of years, as you mentioned. What freed them?
Something powerful, something awesome, something I won't talk about here.
Okay, but maybe in the future.
Yes.
What is outside Limbo?
So heaven, hell, and the human realm all exist within the same plane. So if you think of it laterally, like if you were to go above Limbo, you'd start going into human realm. If you went above that, then you'd start to get into heaven. So it's all actually connected. So Limbo starts to bleed into, Earth, whatever you want to call it. There's not really a name for it aside from they just call it the human realm. So it's just there's another wall there. They all inhabit the same physical space.
Here's a chicken or egg. Was Penumbra or Primordium first? I think Penumbra brags about that too, being super early in the lore.
So Primordium was first, but Penumbra thinks he was.
No, fair enough. Okay, so Void can break down Umbra's connection to the Shroud. The Wildwood's connection, is there a way to also break that they're doing?
No. At least that they are aware of. Channelers can kind of do that to some degree. That's just they have lost all identity of whatever soul they may have been previously. And they have more autonomy than Hollows or Animus. But in terms of disconnecting from the hive mind, not really a hive mind, but just kind of the collective consciousness, which I guess is a hive mind, the Wildwood, that they can't do that.
Yes. The Exiled were freed by the almighty force called marketing. Funny. Funny. Okay, Vladimir Lemon, is there a connection between Talos the Architect and Talos the Automaton, or from Greek mythology?
That's a very good call out. No, there is not a connection. But that's some deep lore right there. Some deep diving. No connection though.
Let's see. What's the effect of Void on non-Umbra beings? Like, would a Hellhorned ever have some of that?
If a Hellhorn were to do some Void, they would probably, for a split second, just get super aggro. Just could beat Hornbreaker, they could beat Shardtail Queen, and then they would probably snap off their own horns in Insanity, and then turn into an imp again. Okay. So it's all good until it's all bad. Don't do drugs.
No. Okay, so Melting Remnant, we haven't talked about them at all quite yet. The Wigless versus the Reformed. I can almost hear the snapping fingers of the gang wars in my head.
Oh yeah.
So how do these two challengers work together, and why are they fighting?
So for the Melting Remnant, everything is centered around their belief or skepticism over wax being a way to prolong their lives. They don't, depending on which side, the Reformed, which are people with wicks, the Reformed is kind of a small church, so to speak, within the Melting Remnant that try to help people get more wax on them, a process called guttering, which makes them become bigger, prolongs their life as far as they believe, but also allows them to melt away. Wickless, on the other hand, have cut off their wicks, and they don't melt anymore. And they can gain wax, but it's not in a way that it's any sort of religious or deeper belief for why they're doing that. So the Melting Remnant are unique in that they've kept and retained a lot of the material wealth or lack thereof that they may have had when they were humans. So they are probably the most aware of their previous life than anyone is in hell. And because of that, some people want to hold on to that, some people don't. It's a very caste society because of that. The Wickless are, as you can see from like the Wickless Baron, really just want to hold on to their wealth and continue to grow that. Whereas the opposite side hopes or strives for a higher purpose, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. So wax is really important. Marimo, you want to talk about wax and your experience with wax? And
Oh, God.
I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. If you guys have any questions for Marimo, you can also ask that. Someone did ask something really early on, but yeah, keep posting them back in here and I will jump back and forth if we want to do that. Why is there no giant legion of wax eating all wax? I don't know. That sounds like a paradox that would destroy the universe.
It'd be really good fan art.
Really good fan art. Okay, here's another wax question for Brendan. How were people of waxen arches before molding? It seems like Little Fade invented it.
How were people? Okay, so
how did they live?
the waxen arches. So there's this thing called the Eternal Flame, which is a very vague name, and they are these flames which are just in spots really, really high up in the waxen arches. This is kind of similar. There's something very similar in Dante's Inferno, which is where a lot of this stuff comes from. And the idea being that all of these bodies have been trying to grab this thing, this flame, which they think is going to help them melt and pass on. But in doing so, they have melted as they kind of try and reach for it. And it just forms these arches of people who are kind of like half dead, half alive. Again, this is hell, very dark, meaning of life, don't do drugs. But in terms of what molding and Little Fade have to do with that, Little Fade was kind of one of the first people to capitalize on what is going on in the Melting Remnant. So I think where the Melting Remnant exists now, you have Rector Flicker and the Wickless and all these different factions within the Melting Remnant, all trying to gain their own wealth, some higher purpose, whatever it is. Little Fade was the first person to really realize that she could take advantage of that. And she is selfless, but also selfish. She's kind of an interesting character that way. But molded and created the ability to mold people out of a desire to give people a way to not go towards that flame anymore. So she kind of broke this cycle of people going up on the arches and melting and creating these huge things, and really ended that and really kickstarted the Wickless and the Reformed and everything that's happened there.
Playing off of that, we have a question. What is the relationship between Little Fade and Rector Flicker, who they're calling Faker Flicker? Because apparently not a fan of him.
So Faker Flicker was a real youngin' back when Little Fade was around. Flicker was raised as Wickless. They're both kind of thieves of the streets. The way that I like thinking about them is if you've ever seen Newsies, that's just word for word. Their backstory is all that. There's, they're just trying to get the news out. But Little Fade and Flicker were very similar. When Little Fade, before the Exodus, before she was exiled, and when the Exodus happened and Little Fade was gone for thousands of years, Flicker kind of found a way to fill that power vacuum that then existed, and unified the Wickless, or formed, and figured out a way to make them play off of each other for his own profit.
Do you think, I mean, this isn't in-game or not, but now we have a bunch of Exile Champion options for people to choose from. Do the original champions know the Exile Champions are back, and how do they feel about that?
They know. It's all, I guess, in terms of, you want to think about timeline of these things, they're aware that it's happened. They haven't really totally processed it yet, so there's not a lot in there about like the reactions of existing champions to Exile Champions, but that may or may not continue to evolve.
There's some assumptions in this question, but I'm going to ask it as is. What is Hef's, Frizzle's daughter, and Blacksmith's relation to Heaven and Hell?
Ooh. It is complicated. I will leave it at that. Yeah, it's complicated.
Complicated. Okay. So what about the train itself, Bone Shaker? Bone Shaker defends itself. It seems to have some autonomy and sentience. Is it being driven by someone, or is the train itself a living, dead being? However you want to define that.
So the train itself is autonomous. It is controlled by the Pyre, and the Pyre, like I said before, did not exist before the Exodus, before the Exiles happened. So, yeah. I'm not going to say any more than that.
Got it. All right, I'm scrolling for other questions here, guys, that are related to stuff we just talked about. You have a lot to say, which is cool. Of course, back to the how did he get a trench coat? Primordium wants to know where's this trench coat coming from?
Sometimes you just find random trench coats around, just like you find bowler hats it's hell. Crazy things happen.
Right.
There are clans that we haven't even discussed or haven't been mentioned. You heard it here first. There's Taylor clan. So, deep lore.
Got it. Spectre A16 asks, Solgard the Martyr basically confirms that Aquath is the name of the Stygian Titan. Is this true?
Do you trust Solgard or not? So really depends on your relationship with Solgard, I suppose.
Got you. How did Heavenly Penance system come forth? Oh man,
getting into deep lore that I can't even remember right now. That is coming from an old argument between Seraph and Fel. So a lot like the existence of the Clipped really stems from sibling squabbles. I mean, it's more intense than that, but that's kind of what it boils down to. So that is kind of that really is the birthplace of a lot of these systems within Heaven Society.
What is Tallow Steel? She seems confused about everything.
She is. She's pretty confused. Talos, I think, is probably the most tragic character in the game. She's really suffering from PTSD, honestly. Her deal is that she is a warrior through and through, and she's called an architect because of her role in creating the shard souls, which are crystals that house souls, and what the exiles all contain in some way or another, or have had a hand in promoting throughout hell. But because of Talus's background, she combat is and war and fighting are really what she knows. So when she was trapped for thousands of years and now has come out of that, her mind and her way of looking at the world is really confused. So she is very confused, and there's a lot to talk about Talus. Talus, I feel like, deserves her own stream because she's pretty messed up in an endearing sort of way. But yeah.
Marimo, this is for you. Glow in the Mark is asking, what is your favorite clan combination to play with, and probably why?
I like random. Random Covenant 25. That's, you just go with what the game gives you. In general, it was funny. I had a friend recently say that Umbra plus Remnant is a terrible combination. Just to prove them wrong, I did that combination on Covenant 25, won the run. I was like, seems good to me. I generally like having Stygian in some capacity, just because I enjoy sharks in general. I like sea life. I like the water. It's just a very personal bias there. No gameplay reason.
No, fair enough. I mean, it's very valid. The art style is a choice. I choose my clans that way sometimes. Here's one. Can we ram the bosses with the train itself in a future update? I once switched Sarah for dinner sometime.
Oh, we should consider that. Put it in the voting feedback channel.
Voting feedback. Train attack. Bam.
I cannot wait to read that later.
Is the pyre sentient?
Yes and no. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna be cagey about the pyre right now. Sorry.
Okay. Who is Hef's mother?
I will not say definitively. I think that there are enough breadcrumbs in the game to possibly piece that together. That's, I think, one of the more difficult things to piece together, but there should be enough. Hopefully, it's in there.
Let's see. So, what was the Exiles' first reaction to the train? Because I guess maybe that's new.
A lot of them had no idea what that thing was. Some of them feel really uncomfortable being trapped in this hunk of metal that's moving down like another hunk of metal. Some really don't. Like, Primordium is so out of it that he's just like spitting people's names and just doesn't even know what's going on. Yeah, each of them kind of had their own reaction. Will Denton and Solgard, I think, are probably the smarter of the five of them. So they kind of had an idea of what it was, or at least like how society could progress to create such a thing. Shardtail doesn't really care. But Fade, I think for sure, is the one who's like, get me out of this thing. This is weird. I can't be in here.
Okay, so response to quote unquote Taylor clan. Do you want to say anything else before this runs through the Discord and becomes canon that you're now?
Oh no, let's let it go. Let's let it go.
Fair enough. Okay, do all clans consider themselves as equals from Hold Vatar Zero?
No. I think each of them kind of, in their own way, think that they're awesome. Hellhorn, for sure, think they're the best. Umbra don't care. Melting Remnant, they publicly admit that everyone else is better, but they internally think that they are the best. That's kind of like Flicker's whole deal, basically, is trying to help people, but really he's just an ass. The Awoken don't care. They're kind of very internally focused. And then the Stygian will not fight you on it. They are probably the most important to the existence of Hell, just because of their role in protecting the Stygian Sea and trying to control the flow of people to what once was where the pyre was housed. So they are probably ostensibly like the most important, and they know that, but they're kind of like, they humble brag about it, I think, a little bit.
Any chance we can have a future event involving train stewards revolting due to being perpetually purged and sacrificed?
Voting feedback.
Voting feedback in Discord, guys. There's a channel. You definitely want to put that one in. Okay, Dire Avenger 20. Will all lore be revealed eventually, or are there some things you want to keep a mystery forever?
I think all lore will be revealed at a certain point. There are definitely things like Hef's mother, for example. I personally find it more fun to try and find these things out myself. If someone, obviously, feel free to at me in Discord. Happy to talk about all this stuff. If you really want like canon answer, I'll respond real quick. So yeah, at a certain point, I'm sure all lore will be made available.
Did the Exiles get played the opening movie when they came back? The cinematic trailer.
Yeah, yes. Over and over and over
Cinematic
again. They
trailer.
Can't skip it.
Okay, let's see. What's the deal with the consumer of crowns? Does he hang out with the imps or what?
He is too big and just too aggressive to hang out with other demons. But the imps are just they're accepting little buggers, so they hang out with them. They have a little like lunch table in the corner of the Scorpion Plains where they all hang out.
He seems like a good guardian.
Crown sits down, he kind of like all leans and does that whole thing. So, yeah.
Do imps and morsels feel pain?
Wow.
This is a dangerous.
Like that question.
This is a dangerous road.
Dangerous. Man. If you pinch them, they kind of giggle. Pain, I don't know about pain. Probably more emotional pain than physical pain.
Okay.
That's hell.
That's hell. Yeah, it's not nice. Do they eat the rocks when they eat the morsels?
Do they eat the rocks? Well, really, most of the time, they're trying to eat the rocks. Sometimes they're trying to eat the morsels. If one happens to get in while you're going for the other one, like, it's just kind of a fringe benefit, I suppose. Different. Yeah, we'll leave it there.
Let's see. FDSSJ5GOKU. Wow, I'm not pronouncing it. This is probably for you, like on a technical question. Asking about other clans in the future. Is it difficult to add something like that UI-wise to make changes to the game? Maybe not a question for you. I don't know. It's as programmery as I can get here.
Code is code.
There. Fair enough. Okay, is there something above heaven?
Something above physically? No. Something larger, I guess, like in a metaphysical sense? Yes. And that's heaven, humans, hell. There's something that kind of ties everything together in a more extra dimensional way, I guess.
Okay, last question. How big is the bogworm? Like how many imps could you stand side by side if you wanted to do a size of a bogworm?
Bogworm's a big boy. I guess if you were to take the map and use a banana for scale, the banana would probably be like 2 or 3 pixels compared to the bogworm. It's pretty big.
Okay. All right, chat. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you to our guests, Marimo and Redbeard, for your awesome answers to give a little bit more insight into the things in Monster Train that people might not know about happening in the dev team. So we will be doing this again every week on Thursday at the same time with various guests from Shiny Shoe. So feel free to jump into Discord if you want to talk to them further and find out more about Hef. So feel free to do that, and we'll see you guys next week. And if you don't have Monster Train, of course you should pick that up, and I'm sure there'll be a link in the chat somewhere. And we'll see you guys next week.